All right, this is part 3 of week two's videos, and I want to make a final point about your paper. And many students in the past, although not all, have taken advantage of this option. That is to email me a draft, no matter how rough the draft is, of your paper by November 10th, 2020. That's 2 weeks before the deadline on November 24th. That gives me a chance to literally edit it in writing, and I write on a printed out version of your paper, and then my staff scans and emails it back to you see either what you're doing right, or it's mainly English and grammar changes that I need to make. Because unfortunately, and this is not your fault, many of your teachers in grade school, junior high, high school did not adequately teach students how to write. Now my kids, and I have 5 of them, they all happen to be good writers. One has a PhD, one just got a job as a writer for a startup company in Denver. Making it's a real job. His first big boy job at age, he's like 29. And so my kids are good writers because of one reason. They had a teacher at Roosevelt School in Belleville named Ms. Michelle Wilson, who taught all my kids writing, and that is the common denominator my kids have as to why they happen to be good writers. I cannot take the credit for that. So let's talk about on the syllabus also. Now I'm on the next to last page, extra credit. So you can write a 2-page double-spaced paper on these topics after you view videos or listen to audios. You get 10 points per paper, maximum 4 papers. That is 40 points total, which is almost half of a grade being 100 points. So the first one is the one we're featuring this week that you have to listen to. Although, yeah, you can do extra credit. You can write up what you hear on Reasonable Doubt coming up on the 29th of August and write a 2-page double-spaced paper on your takeaways from listening to the audio. That's on iTunes. On Netflix, they have 2 really good videos for this class. And once again, you can watch up to 4 episodes. The normal episodes, I think, are about an hour long. 2-page double-spaced paper for each, up to 4 of them. One is an amazing video called Jeffrey Epstein, Filthy Rich, and that's on Netflix. And hopefully many of you have already seen this. It is hard to watch. It is about this pedophile and billionaire Jeffrey Epstein and what he was able to get away with for years, molesting young women, young girls, teenage girls, and also his powerful friends. You will see who the heroes are in that story. Typically, in this, I remember from when I saw it a few months ago, they are just a normal lawyer from Miami who represents a lot of these young women. Also, a journalist is featured from the Miami Herald, and I regard her as a hero up front. I'm not spoiling anything for you when you see this. Also, there's a really talented private investigator who's featured for the good guys and the good gals of this story. But the thing about this video is that many of the girls who were molested by Epstein, and there's no doubt that they're telling the truth, admitted to recruiting for him as they got older. Now that is a hell of a thing for them to admit, but you know that when people admit that stuff, they would not admit it if it wasn't true. So this is a devastating indictment of the system. There are villains in the case besides Epstein. One is Ghislaine Maxwell, who's facing federal indictment now in New York City for allegedly being his recruiter and participating in all this. And these various politicians and big names you're going to hear about who have lied about whether they went to pedophile island yet in the Caribbean. There is one ex-president of the United States who's on record as saying, well, I never went to that island. But in fact, there are 2 witnesses who place him there. So just ask yourself, in terms of evaluating evidence against these big shots who maybe thought that because they're the movers and shakers and the prime movers in the world, that the old rules didn't apply to them if they're rich enough and if they're powerful enough that they could get anything they wanted in life. 2 witnesses put that ex-president of the United States on the island. So you ask yourself, well, why would Mr. Clinton lie about that? Well, it's because he doesn't want to be placed on that island because he knew exactly what was happening there. He had numerous flights. He's in the jet logs, a private jet, on Epstein's planes in a highly sexually charged atmosphere, the bedroom on there, and a bunch of young girls there. And he's on them. I have seen the flight manifest online. and they are real. You might want to write a paper about his involvement, because I don't think anybody should have immunity from prosecution if they have lied under oath, if they have molested children. That's an infamia. That's an Italian word for something that would be so bad you can't even talk about it. It's an infamous crime. Now, I don't know that he committed any crimes, but all I'm saying is he should be thoroughly investigated for his involvement. There is another video on Netflix that you can watch, up to 4 episodes, 10 points an episode that you write a paper about, and that is Surviving R. Kelly. Once again, and I've seen part of it, the idea of these young women going on tape and talking about what happened to them. He is under indictment by the feds and state court right now. Is kind of an amazing thing that they're doing. It's very sad that they had to endure what they did. Also, a video on HBO, documentary about a man named Robert Durst, likely a multiple murderer in multiple cases. It's called Jinxed, Jinxed, and Mr. Durst is facing indictment now and trial soon in Los Angeles over killing of his best friend, who's a woman. Also, you can view, for extra credit, any other approved by email by me, CJS type podcast or hour-long video, and they are legion. They're all over the internet, and many of them are good. I'm going to tell you a little bit about my teaching assistants. Mr. Allen, you want to come over on camera briefly so the students can meet you? Okay, this gentleman is Cornelius Allen. I taught him last spring in a term that was shortened by the COVID, and he asked to be an intern of mine. I have 2 interns this time in my law office. They work hard. Part of the work is to help me teach this class, frankly, because I'm technically I couldn't do this at all. And okay, thank you, sir. And Cornelius wants to be a lawyer, and he's very sharp and a fair man and a very conscientious young man, and it's a pleasure to have him and Ms. Hopkins around my office. Shay Hopkins is off this week because she had a death of someone close to her and her family. I feel horrible for her. But what they're going to do is they're going to operate the class Blackboard page. They will direct my video lectures, and when they do, they really help me. Also, they will do work around my office too, in terms of real work on investigating cases and figuring out what the facts are in certain cases, figuring out where to go. So my interns, and I've had probably 4 or 5 of them in the last 2 or 3 years, they really do work in my law office, and it is fun to have young people around. Now, if you send me videos with your 1 or 2 minutes with your view, let's say you send me a view of your view of the Blake case, which I would encourage you to do. I will not have my interns put that up on the YouTube. The only stuff on YouTube is going to be me talking. So the privacy you would have is knowing that only people, and there's like 84 of you all now in this class, will see your videos. No one else will see your videos. I don't want to do that, and I want you to have some degree of comfortableness and privacy. So for this week, part 3 of this video, I want to do my opening quotes. I told you I always wrote on the board when I taught live in person with some quotes, and many times I never discussed them, but I put them up there on the board because I want you to think. And part of this class is learning how to think in an analytical way, and also in a feeling, caring way for your fellow human beings. And one is one that I remembered recently by my old scoutmaster, who was a wonderful man to me. His name was Joe Giger. He was an ex-lieutenant colonel in the military, and he was my scoutmaster for many, many years when I was 11 until I got out when I was like 15. And here's what he said. He said, always leave your campsite better than you found it. So leave whatever you're doing in better condition than you found it. And I think that's really, really important. It was environmentally conscious back in the day, and it also has a lot of common sense. Here's what he meant. That if we go on a campsite in the Ozarks, public campsite, we're going to be there for 2 or 3 days, and we got 20 kids and 3 leaders, and it's a mess and it's been trashed up. Well, obviously the first thing we would do would be to clean it up. Right away, that will qualify as leaving the campsite better than we found it. But also, he wanted us to improve it some way, in some small way or maybe in a big way. And that's a great way to live your life. And the second quote I want to give you is written in a book, an autobiography of a very famous and great Hollywood movie director. He's still alive. His name is William Friedkin. In the business, he's known as Billy Friedkin. And he directed The Exorcist. He directed The French Connection, which I've shown in my class before when we have movie night on the last night when I'm going over grades with people. I would show The French Connection. It's only about an hour and a half, hour 45 minutes. Shot in New York, guerrilla style, no permits. Could never be done that way these days. But it won Oscars for him, Best Director, Best Picture, Best Screenplay. Gene Hackman, who played a real cop in the movie. Character's name was Popeye Doyle, but he was based on a real police officer who was alive at the time, and he was one of the advisors on the film. In fact, he's in the film. It's a great movie. It's a great police procedural. It's fun to watch. And Billy Friedkin wrote in his book, it's an excellent autobiography, and he said this. He said, "Life can only be lived forward, but can only be examined backwards." Okay, enough about those quotes. Where are we on time, sir?
11 minutes.
Okay, I'm only trying to do 20 minutes as I explained, so Mr. Allen and Ms. Hopkins have an easier time to upload videos. Okay, so here's the main material of constitutional law I want to start now in the class. We've gone over a bunch of preliminary matters. We've gone over some matters in detail about cases and definitions and how the courts work. But now we're going to talk about sources of constitutional law, sources of what your individual rights are supposed to be guaranteed by the Constitution. Well, I'm going to list them first, and then we're going to go through them one by one. And there's a number of them. A, the original Constitution of 1787. I keep this booklet with the Declaration of Independence, the Constitution, the amendments with me in my briefcase all the time at the courthouse. So the Constitution of 1787, that's when it was ratified by the states. You do have to know the year. There's no reason why educated people who are well-rounded should not know the years that these founding documents were established. So the first source of individual rights and sources of constitutional law is the original Constitution. We're going to come back to that in a minute. B, the second source and the main source is the Bill of Rights. That would be the first 10 amendments to the Constitution. They were ratified by the states 4 years later in 1791. So there are many more individual rights contained in the Bill of Rights than in the original Constitution, and that's why they were created by the Founding Fathers. We're going to go over those pretty extensively soon. C, after the Bill of Rights, there are 3 post-Civil War amendments that are classic amendments, and they were basically passed beginning in 1866, and they are the 13th, 14th, and 15th Amendments to the Constitution. And once again today, we will go over them in detail, including every word most words of them. Sometimes I'm going to paraphrase. D, the fourth source of constitutional rights would be judicial decisions interpreting what the words in this booklet mean. So an example of that would be Roe versus Wade, 1973, January 22nd, 1973, a very famous date in legal history. That is the abortion rights case that was written by a man from Nashville, Illinois, Harry Blackmun, who was a big lawyer for the medical profession for the Mayo Clinic before he hit the bench and before he became a Nixon appointee in the United States Supreme Court, I believe in 1970, 70, or 71. Harry Blackmun wrote the majority 5-4 opinion with the 4 justices on the left at that time joining him and the 4 justices on the right finding that there was no right to abortion in the words of the Constitution. So let me point this out to you right away. How does the Supreme Court, as opposed to the legislative branch or the executive branch or the bureaucracy, how do they get to decide what the words in the Constitution mean? Well, there's a case that you have to memorize the name of, you have to know it, Marbury versus Madison from the early 19th century. In other words, about 10 or 20 years after the Bill of Rights was passed. And that's when the Supreme Court decided that they're the ones who get to decide what the Constitution means. That is not coincidental. E, the fifth source of constitutional or civil rights, criminal procedure rights, would be in statutory laws. That would be laws passed by state legislatures about how criminal proceedings are going to be conducted, federal laws passed by the Congress, signed by the President, that codifies are known as the Federal Rules of Criminal Procedure, and they're very thick, and they show you step by step how federal judges are to conduct criminal preliminary hearings and criminal cases, appeals, etc. And we're not going to spend a lot of time on that. There are even local court rules. We have them in St. Clair County that talk about process, and we're not going to talk about those either. I just want you to know that they exist. And the final source that I'm going to give you a thumbnail sketch on at this time of constitutional rights would be in state constitutions. All right, let's go back to the original Constitution of 1787, and I'm going to highlight what you really need to know as a citizen, and I'm going to highlight, more importantly for purpose of this class, what individual rights or process rights there are in the original Constitution of 1787. Well, the first words that stand out to us, or should stand up to us, and I do believe in reading and trying to interpret the Constitution like Justice Scalia did, and that is to look at the plain language of the words. He was what was called an originalist. Now, I don't believe all the time in using originalism. It's a very complex subject. I believe sometimes when the words are not there in the Constitution that will decide a case, then we can use what is the second mode of constitutional interpretation, used by very intelligent justices up there in Washington now, and that would be the living constitutional method that has a little bit less structure to it, but it can nonetheless, in the right case, be valid. My own opinion is Justice Kagan is the best writer that court has ever had. She really never practiced law much. She was a Solicitor General under the Obama administration. More importantly, she was the Dean of Harvard Law School, and she was a law teacher. And she has a great temperament, and she's brilliant. And you will probably see some of her videos where she talks about her method of constitutional interpretation later. And she's a force of nature, and I would love to meet her sometime, and hopefully I will. Okay, where are we on time?
17 minutes.
Okay, I have another 3 minutes. Here's what the preamble to the Constitution says. Page 1, quote, "We the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union, establish justice, ensure domestic tranquility, provide for the common defense, promote the general welfare, and secure the blessings of liberty to ourselves and our posterity, do ordain and establish this Constitution for the United States of America." Now, entire 50 to 100-page law review articles have been written by law students or law professors about what these words mean. I do want to point this out to you in the last couple minutes. If you listen to M.L. King's, Dr. King's I Have a Dream speech in August of 1963, 4 months before Kennedy was murdered on Elm Street in Dallas, Texas, I've counted, and I've played this audio for my students before, how many times the man uses the words freedom or liberty in that speech that was made in order that black people would have equal rights in employment and voting rights, to where their voting rights would not be infringed by some very bad people down in the South chiefly. And he used that term, liberty or freedom, that I use interchangeably in my own life, 25 or 26 times. Ask yourself, how many times do modern day politicians ever talk about liberty or your freedom? It's mostly about power and control over your lives. And I want you to question that at every turn, because many times your ethics, morals, upbringing are vastly superior to some of these people in Washington and Springfield that hold the reins of power. And I want you to recognize that and ask yourself, why should you be ruled with irrational rules by people who do not have your morals and ethics? It's a real question in the United States in 2020, or at least it should be. All right, we're going to end this part of the video now, and we're going to talk more about the original Constitution in a couple of minutes. Thank you.